Thank you. This is Immerse, the podcast and book. We are delighted to have you join us. Immerse is produced by Charlie Morrow, Sean McCann, and Bart Plantinga for Morrow Sound, Vermont and Helsinki, and Recital Edition, Los Angeles. Immerse.
Canadian artist Luc Courchesne was an early convert to media arts some 50 years ago. He began utilizing computer technologies in 1984 to create interactive video, and later, with his immersive and interactive installations, panoscopic images, and his self-designed equipment, he helped transform spectators into visitors, actors, and inhabitants of his immersive worlds. He was professor of design at Université de Montréal from 1989 to 2013 and a founding member of SOT, the Society for Art and Technology. He has since created some 50 installations and image series. His work is part of many major collections, and he's been exhibited in major galleries worldwide, as well as earning numerous prestigious awards for his visual art. He's currently working on the creation of social virtual worlds. I met Luc over the last 20 years. My home in Vermont is practically at the border of French Canada, and it's been my pleasure to visit La Sotte as it evolved and to meet Luc there and to see his lab and the many people that have collaborated with him. He has really done an amazing job with the technical side of it. Luc, welcome to Immerse.
So what are the two questions?
The two questions are, what are you currently doing in your practice? And the other question is just, what was your first inspiration and how did it catapult
you? In life?
In life, yeah. Because this book is filled with timelines. It has one timeline for each person I interview for their life. And then Courchesne has written a history of immersive experience from prehistory to the computer. And so we have then this long timeline before we all got here. We're sitting in La Sotte in Montreal. Luc, would you please introduce yourself?
Yeah, my name is Luc Courchesne. I am this year in 2020. I'm 67 years old for now. I'll turn 68. Looking forward to it actually. And have the chance to be one of the co-founder of SAT, which was created close to 25 years ago. So I've been following this beautiful organization, how it evolved, how it brought together beautiful people, including you, Charlie. So my practice has been over the last 45, 50 years around art, visual art mostly. I'm a visual person, although I understand the importance of sound. But as a visual artist, I was really captured by the idea of immersion, being immersed. So I was more an installation artist, first as an exhibition designer, and when I grew up as an artist, when I gained the freedom to be an artist, I started to work with installation at the time where computers were starting to be part of the artist toolbox, in the late 70s, early 80s, especially for me with the Laserdisc. The Laserdisc captured my attention as the ultimate multimedia medium, because you could have images, sounds, videos in there, and each of these elements could be accessed, in real time. So for me, it opened a whole set of possibilities of which I wanted to explore. But because the computer was basically, a typewriter and a TV, as an artist interested in space, I wanted to do installations where I would hide this to make the experience sort of more comprehensive, or more about the subject or the artistic intention rather than the technology. And that was difficult to do, probably as you remember, in the early days of computers. The computer was the interesting thing. So if you were trying to make art with it, it was quite a challenge. So I come from there, interest for immersion, using installation to explore, the relationship between our bodies and nature, but through installation, through the media of photography, video, and these things, and eventually, grew with the technology to the point, like everybody now, where we say, okay, technology is not the idea, it's just a tool, so we still have to have good artistic intentions.
That's very beautiful. I think that what you've built here at SOT is quite remarkable in that it makes it possible for so many people to operate in research and in production and as audience, as community. It educates funders, it educates the intellectual community. All of that is, I think, an interesting immersion because it means you are embedded now in the society where you started out just making experiences. Could you talk a little bit about that? It's an extra question, but I'm fascinated.
Yeah, in fact, SAT is really Monique's idea, Monique Sabo's idea. I was just, not too far from her to be able to benefit from its existence. But what Monique had in mind when she created the SAT was that, as opposed to the traditional artist center that we had in Montreal or in Canada, as you know, they were basically a pool of artists, artists pooling together to acquire equipment, like sound production or video equipment. And Monique and I met, when we were on the board of a Prime Video, which was a video production artist-run center. And it was clear when she created the SAT that in the mid-90s, all the production equipment had become fairly easy to acquire, and the artists owned their own production equipment. So the reason to gather as artists was not about equipment anymore, it was about ideas and sharing your network, your knowledge of a very fast changing creative environment. Computers, change every 6 months, operating systems evolve. The thing you did 6 months ago or a year ago were hard to play again on the newer machines and this and that. So we needed a support group, in fact. So it was not so much about technology or equipment, but as about ideas. And that's what she's been able to do. SAT has been able to grow through generations of technologies because it's about ideas. It's about how you can repurpose technology in a context where you're not trying to sell a product or you're not trying to convince anybody. You're just trying to understand, who we are as a species in the sort of environment we live in. And so that's very critical and important these days.
I see you've succeeded. Going to my first question, I was wondering where your first inspiration came in terms of understanding excitement about immersivity.
Well, the thing that is very vivid for me is my visit of the pavilion of the telephone at Expo 67, which was an animated panorama. And I was 14 years old at the time, and it was very difficult to get into this pavilion because it was one of the most popular pavilions of Expo 67. So one day I said, this is the day where I'm going to go to see the show. And so I went up really early, was waiting in line when the gates opened, and then I ran to be in line for this, and I could see it finally. And I was really mesmerized by it. For me, it was, at 14 years old, I did not understand the complexity of such a project. So I just thought, this would be the kind of things that would be very familiar in my lifetime. At 14 years old, I did not know at the time that I was going to be an artist or a designer. I just knew that this would be something that I would experience in my lifetime. And it turned out it was not so common, actually. I did not understand that at the time that it was very difficult, very expensive to produce. So, but in my lifetime, I have seen, the arrival of computers, the fact that computer became multimedia. As soon as the computer got, more powerful, faster, better graphic cards. Suddenly, you saw QuickTime VR. QuickTime VR was this sort of photographic panorama that appeared, and gradually the panorama. Or this idea of capturing the space around you and not just like a field of view, but the whole space became more doable, and eventually, we ended up with full dome technologies where the dome of planetarium became basically computer screens, and all in the meantime the capture equipment became immersive. I remember there was a company called Be Here. I guess it was around 97, 98 that was starting to appear on the web, and they could, with high definition still cameras, they could capture a whole, spherical environment. So I was really fascinated by that. But there was no full dome at the time, no VR. Well, there were some VR, but it was still pretty exclusive, so from there, technology developed, and within 5, 6, 7 years, you had choices of recording equipment that allowed somebody to do immersive photography or video. And I was riding this wave and trying to make it affordable for artists, for me and then other artists like me. And so I basically tried to repurpose this equipment and created my panoscope. From 98 to 2000, these 2 years are when I developed this thing. I found a lens developed by a Columbia professor in New York that the license had been bought by a company called Remote Reality. And they were marketing this for real estate. They were big real estate, owners. So they wanted you could shoot, a space and put it on the web. So I took their lens and adapted it to the very newly introduced high definition video camera. And suddenly I could have an immersive video in the shape of a disc. And that was in '99. And so I designed the projection system with a very wide angle lens that I could take this image I got from the camera and project it straight into the dome and then get a single channel immersive production system. I was very proud of that. Actually, I premiered my device at SIGGRAPH in New Orleans in 2000, in July 2000 or August. And I was invited by ACM to go to their big show the next spring in San Jose, California. And I met with people there, and sort of triggered my career as an immersive, artist.
It's a great story.
I
remember these things, seeing them from New York, because you were becoming more and more visible over that time, particularly through the trade press, and through the art world too.
Actually, one of the things we showed this project in, Wired, the magazine Wired had something called the Wired Next Fest, and we were invited in Chicago for their edition in 2005, I think. And there was a film crew there that was very interested in our installation. And they didn't know who they were or who they worked for, but they came every day. They would come and they ask questions and they look and take pictures and everything. And then we didn't hear about them anymore. And suddenly I got a call in 2009 from our son. Did you see the last Star Trek movie? I said, no. I said, your thing isn't there. So they had basically gotten their inspiration from the panoscope, this like inverted dome. And they used it as a prop in the 2009 Star Trek movie. That's where they train, their kids in these immersive devices. So that was interesting how you can inspire. You don't know every time what is the output of what you do, but you do inspire people and things.
That's fantastic. Yeah. There's one part of the more recent work that I'm particularly touched by, which is there's two communities that you've been reaching out in, amongst others. One is the dome to dome, or connecting spaces, and the other is the reaching out into the medical and healing community. I wonder if you could speak a little about each.
Yeah, that's the SAT. SAT has this beautiful, instrument, which is the dome, and the whole workflow to create content for the dome. And of course, it was made for artists like me and others. We invite them in, we show them how it works, they go home, they work, they come back, and eventually when they're finished, we show this publicly. Every night there is a performance in the dome. But at one point, Monique said, okay, let's try to open up a little bit to the community beyond artists. And she happened to meet the director of a hospital, very progressive director of a children's hospital, and they said, okay, let's put our people together, your people, your artists with my medical staff, and see, what happens. So a lot of artists from SAT spent time at the hospital, children's hospital, and they found opportunities where they could apply, expand their art, their skills to help, young patients, their parents, the staff, the doctor, the nurses, to see healthcare differently. And so it gave a number of projects, with some of them have been realized. But one of them, very spectacular one, was that with a therapy with schizophrenia, the doctor and the artist, Louis-Philippe and others, they had the idea to use the dome to try to design an environment that would help them go beyond their limitations. If they were scared of huge spaces, they would create these spaces and see what is the trigger when it starts to be menacing or something. The beautiful concept there was that it's not the artists who design the environments, it's the children themselves design the environment that they thought would test their limits. So it was a beautiful model of therapy that was developed in combination between artists, patients, and their doctors.
That's a remarkable story. I would add a sidebar because there's a similar story here in Canada about using porta-packs in the far north, where people were trying to document the life of Inuit and other Inuktitut communities. And the way it was done was by giving them the equipment so that they weren't subjects, but they were auteurs themselves. And this seems to me, there's some very special spirit here in Canada about understanding the humanity of media.
Well, there's another thing, Robert Forget.
Yes.
You know Robert Forget? He was one of the sort of visionary of the National Film Board of Canada. And he was always the guy who basically saw new technology come in and he said, okay, how can we put this to use to give it like real, meaning or real use? So when these portable camera and recording equipment came, he created a videograph. And I know about it because I was a student at the Collège Cégep du Vieux-Montréal, just next door on the corner of Saint-Denis and the Maisonneuve. And the videograph, they basically built a small shack there. They had the equipment, and basically you could go there, anybody, and say, can I borrow a camera? Yes, sure. The condition was that what you shot with it was shared with the community. So you borrowed the camera, you did recording. I don't even think they asked you what you wanted to do with it. And then you edited something and you made it available in the library. So the library of Project grew, and it was for the NFB and Robert and the NFB, a kind of experiment on what people would do. And it goes back to your story about the North. If you give people equipment, then you will know how they look at the world. So that's one example of how the NFB in Canada has been working way beyond just documentation of the Canadian culture, into explorations that made a big difference for people like me.
Oh, thank you very much. I appreciate very much the opportunity to chat with you about what you've been doing, and I'll keep you posted as this thing develops.
But there's one thing I want to touch on.
Oh, please,
with you.
You're quite welcome.
So, as I said, you told me you have a huge archive of video, audio files, and that you are trying to organize. And that's the thing I've been working on with my own archive, where basically I've been cleaning my boxes, my crates, trying to sort all the projects, all the videos and the photos and the 3D objects and the sounds I had. And my idea was to create an archive in VR, where you basically, because originally I was an exhibition designer, so I take pleasure in organizing space with objects, so that you can create your story by wandering through the physical space. But I was taking pleasure at doing this in the virtual space, which is endless. It has no boundaries, it has no gravity. So at first, the first use of the archive was to position objects, by hand, more or less, to create this path, the circulation. And then we realized there was just too many things. And one of my colleagues said, let's program an algorithm that will position things automatically. And we tried that, and it worked. And suddenly there was no limitation in the numbers of assets or objects you could have. And the algorithm can be pretty straightforward. Like you can say, okay, I want everything to be this size and arranged 90 degrees, so you can create the illusion of a conventional exhibition space. But then we tried things that were not like that were more like creative in a way. And it was very interesting to see how the algorithm, outside of the human logic, can create order in a different way, and how interesting that is. And the most interesting mode was random, when we tell the computer, do anything, and then you see these beautiful accidents in an image, next to another one, things that could not have been planned, but that were beautiful in the sense that it created new sort of meaning with the same material. So the work I'm engaged in right now is called ontology. So basically, an ontology is a model of the world. It's like we were talking about Borges, his infinite library. It's a little bit like that. You have so many books, but how do you order them? It's like you have so many things in your archive. How do you order them? So the ontology, the design of the ontology, is like the generative, concept where you say, okay, let's create this model of the world, and then see what happens when we apply it to this body of work. And so that's what I'm working on. We're working on ontologies, sort of models of the world, and then putting, a database or assets in there and look at how it invites you in. And that's the idea of immersion. That's the beauty of immersion, inviting people in.
Beautifully said. Well, thank you so much for that last. I'm sorry, I didn't remember until you pointed out.
That was your second question.
That was my second question. So thank you.
Excellent.
Well, I appreciate the interview, and we'll continue.
Thank you. This is Immerse, the podcast and book. We are delighted to have you join us. Immerse is produced by Charlie Morrow, Sean McCann, and Bart Plantenga for Morrow Sound, Vermont and Helsinki, and Recital Edition, Los Angeles.
Immerse, immerse, immerse.
Immerse, 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 immerse.
And then an empty shell to fall back into the sea.